this workshop is based on the work developed under the Narratives Observatory Combating Disinformation in Europe Systemically. This is a project that's co-funded by the European Commission, and that really looks at developing a new way to deal and think about disinformation by combining narratology and insights from narrative analysis with network science and other perspectives to really get an overview of how are narratives really spreading, how is disinformation really spreading, and can we find a different way, which is not only based on technical solutions, to be dealing with disinformation. This is obviously a really pressing issue. 2016 post-truth was designed as the word of the year. And I think a lot of governments all around the world started coming with solutions or policy recommendations on how to deal with this. Unfortunately, what we're seeing is that disinformation is becoming more and more rampant, including the increase of anti-science movements. So finding alternative solutions or solutions that can be added to the toolbox of possible ways to dealing with this is becoming more and more relevant, especially in a world where we are predicting more crises between climate change, pandemics, and other things. So this is for us a really important project to say, how can we think about these differently, and how can we come up with ways that are also taking stock from all the science and all the research that is out there about how the brain works, how societies develop concepts, so from psychology, from philosophy, from sociology, behavioral science, neuroscience, and all these different impacts to think differently about this issue. But you're not here to listen to me. You're here to listen to the insights from Professor David Chavalarias and Professor Marcina Piorkowski. So to start off, I would like to give the floor to David. David is one of the three is heading one of the three research groups active within Note from the research perspective from CNRS in Paris. And he will show some really interesting work from the network science perspective of how what we can see and learn from the narratives around COVID-19. David, the floor is yours.
So I will present you some preliminary results about how vaccine narratives develops, and the emphasis will be also on the systemic inclusion of all these narratives into some broader streams of disinformation circulations. So as I will show you, we have different observatories in different domains, and we will see how disinformation about vaccine actually is connected to other kind of disinformation. So I will start here to share my slides. So okay, stop to okay. So we are based we are a Note partner based in Paris, and we are working on different kind of infrastructure. But one of the core infrastructure is called Multivac, which is developed by Mazia Panahi here, which has been collecting some data from different sources, but mostly from Twitters. And another infrastructure is Garantext, which is specialized in analyzing textual data. So I will show you how we can both have insights from analyzing what is happening online, and also other archives. For example, in the nodes, we have AFP as a partner. And so that they have some fact-checking units that are looking at the different kind of narratives circulating online. And so we'll show you how you can have some insight by both of these sources. So I will start with Garantext approach. So we have analyzed and received all the, I will just isolate this here, not this here, okay. Okay, one moment. Okay, so to start with, to know what kind of narratives are circulating on the vaccines, we can enter by the way of the fact checkers. So here we have all the fact checks from AFP in Polish. This is about 400 fact check in Polish. In French, 100,040, 100,400. And also in Spanish, here, 3,000, and in English, 4,000. So first of all, and every fact check is something like that. So here you have something about unproven treatment for tooth decay spread online. There is it can concern various different topics. So these tools, Gargotex, allow you to import this kind of textual database and try to extract from them the different topics that these database are dealing with. So, for example, here I will concentrate on the French and the English speaking database, which are the two languages that I understand, but same can be done with Polish and Spanish. So, for example, if you go to the French things or English things, better, more universal, and you search for vaccine, then you can see here that you have something about, yeah, let's take something which really talking about vaccines. If I walk here, this one. So this is a kind of misinformation about vaccines that it links vaccines to cell destruction. So you see that inside the text you have some highlights about particular vocabulary about that this text is talking about, and we have annotated this text. We can continue. For example, we can add some body's immunes to highlight immunities, and when we have done that, then we can plot the graphs. It means that all the relation between the different concepts that we have extracted from this text. So we can wait a few seconds for this to specialize, but I will go directly to the graph, how it is specialized. And this the output is a map like that. So here what you have is a representation in terms of networks of the different topics that have been addressed in this AFP fact-checking. And what you see immediately is that you have different things. For example, here we are talking about United States and the fraud, the ballot, so it's more democratic, about the democracy. But here you have a big cluster, and this is all about the question of the pandemics and the vaccines with different approach, the effect of the vaccines, the issue about the clinical trials that might be not sure, this misinformation about what you have inside the vaccine and especially RNA. So here you see that this has been really present, the question of the vaccine in the disinformation, mediatic disinformation landscape. And so this is for English. But if you do the same thing for French, then you have this map here, and you see almost the same structure. Even in French, there seems to be more different topics. For example, these two clusters here and this one here are also both about the question of vaccines. So here it's about, again, we find the same topics, and this is what is interesting, that you have some kind of different misinformation that circulates between different language-speaking sphere. So here you find again things about indesirable effects of vaccine, etc. And you have here a specific cluster which is targeting the pregnant women, and could be that a specific campaign to bring the fear among this kind of population. So this is from the fact checker perspectives, and here what I wanted to show you is that we can analyze this kind of database we can do it worldwide. There is no really limits on the number of texts that we have to analyze, and we can analyze, sorry. And once you have done that, you immediately see what are the big topics that are used as disinformation. And here, vaccine is really among one of the core thing. So now let's switch to the online, so social networks. So basically, all these fact-checking, mostly, very often they are based on things that are circulating on the social networks. So we have this observatory on the discussion on vaccines on X, formerly Twitter. And I can say that we had it because, as you know, Twitter has closed everything. So now within the Node project, we are looking to other kind of networks, but we have not yet analyzed this. But so here I will talk about the database that was active until last June. And so we have several hundred of millions of tweets about the COVID pandemics through time. So we have since 2020. And when you, so first I will quickly explain you how we analyze this kind of data. So we have Twitter data. So on Twitter, when you have somebody which is saying something, for example, here Greta Thunberg, she's saying something, and an account that has subscribed to Greta Thunberg receives this message and can decide to transfer it, to relay or to share this same message with the people that follow this second account, so that it can reach a third person. So what we have done is that we have observed all these exchanges, and when you do this for sufficiently enough time, you see that you have some area of the graph, so some people that interact a lot between each other and more than between each other than within the rest of the account on Twitter. So when you do that, you can analyze this graph with some mathematical tools and identify this cluster, so these communities. And if you do this at the scale of the exchanges on the COVID vaccines and the pandemics, then you have this kind of representation. So here, what you see is the global debate in multi-language. So here we are tracking keywords related to the pandemics in French and in English. But since we are also tracking COVID-19, for example, we also have lots of other languages, like, for example, Spanish, which are around here, and Indian, which are around here, etc. So Indian in English, but also in Hindi. So this is the global structure of the landscapes of the debates on COVID vaccines. And what you see here is that I will try to, I will just display you to be able to zoom inside this picture. Wait a minute. Yeah, I will take this one. Okay, so here what you have is that you have a core of accounts that are mainly the mainstream media and international media, like Reuters, the press agencies and mainstream media, so Reuters, AP, etc. And also well-known specialists. So, for example, Dr. Eric Ding was a specialist in these pandemics. So you have these clusters that are disseminating the information on the pandemics. So close to this, you have different countries. So inside here, you have the US, and here you have the Canadian one. More further, you have the Spanish cluster that are talking about in Spanish, etc. And the global structure is a star shape. So you have a core with World Health Organization and all the specialists that are disseminating the information. And this information spreads towards the other national hub. Here you have France, here you have Spanish, here you have India, and here you have UK. Okay. And so this is make a star shapes. And if you go further in the star branches, then you reach eventually as a anti-vax. So for example, here, this branch here, this is France. And so here you have the French government, the Minister of Health Ministry, etc., and also some French newspaper. And they make like a cohesive community. And here you have all the community which is anti-vax and which is relaying this information. And you see that this anti-vax community has some links here with this community, which is the English-speaking anti-vax community. So now we'll go deeper in this structure to understand how all this is structuring in circulation. So first of all, just to emphasize that this graph does not need to analyze what is said. It's only analyzing the interaction between people, and what gets out is that there is a strong social structure, and when you go inside this social structure, then you see that inside you have homogeneous point of view about the pandemics and the vaccine crisis, the pandemic crisis and the vaccine efficiency, etc., etc. So now we will go inside this more details. So here I will zoom in the French politics, because we have also this observatory on French politics that we are now extending to the other different language. But here you have the French politics. So sorry, I want to show you this graph before. So here you have the French politics, and here what you have is the snapshot of the political landscape in French for two different periods that are separated by 6 years. So here, the principle of this graph are exactly the same as the one on the vaccine. And by the way, it reminds me that I can also show you the raw materials of this, which is quite interesting. So just I will show you this because this is also, sorry, I will show you now a film about that. Okay, so sorry, just I should have prepared this before, but I will. Yes, here. So this will give you an overview about. Sorry, I have to. This will work like that. Excuse me. Where is my thing? Okay. Let's do this. I just stopped sharing my screen just for a moment. Okay. Yes. Yeah, let's do it. Okay. So you will look how so you see the video? Yes, okay. So here I will show an example about how some narratives about something related to vaccines can spread in some kind of information ecosystems. Here what you will see is the polemics about the Omicron, so Omicron variant, inside the French informational space. So basically here, what you have is every dot here is a Twitter account. And for now, and we will show the interactions that mention the terms Omicron. As you know, it is a variant that was very contagious and that came late in the pandemics. And this was an opportunity, I just stop here, it was an opportunity for conspirationist theorists to say, this is a new fabricated variant of Omicron, and you will see that it is a new way that the government has found to control you. So here, what you see is that this picture, it does not move much because it was before Omicron arrived, and now we are in November 21, 26 November 21, and the Omicron variant has just been classified as worrying by the World Health Organization. And you will see now, almost hour per hour, how this announcement of a new variant has been relayed online. So here, just to explain you, here you see they are moving. Every time you see a link like that, it means that there is a tweet that is talking about Omicron that has been spread between accounts, and the account on the picture, they will organize themselves to be grouped by accounts that are relaying the same thing. So here you see there is a big account here, which is called Asselineau. Asselineau is a well-known conspirationist in France, and he is one of the first to relay this idea that Omicron is spreading. And here you see the reaction of Florent Philippot, which is another far-right guy in France, who just starting to say Omicron, Macron, so the French president, is a much more dangerous variant than Omicron. Just for the story. So now you will see the dynamics, and you see that it is really an explosive dynamics. So here, immediately you see that you have this cluster here. All these people here are more or less using the Omicron variants to either spread disinformation about Omicron, or to say that the pandemic is not well managed, that this variant should never have happened, etc., etc. So all these clusters here, they are using this emergence of the Omicron variant to push their political agenda. And here you have the answer of the government. So you have few governmental sources that are reacting, and you see that they are disconnected, of course, in the informational landscape. And so this was just the beginning. We have discovered Omicron, and now there will be the start of the pandemic about Omicron with the raising of the case with contamination. So here they say they are instrumenting Omicron, and this is the number of cases. So you see the polemics is rising. So you have alerts, and this is the thing is spreading. So the polemics is growing in France. Now you have new parties. The left, it is getting inside these things, and so you have seen that very quickly. At the beginning, it was just starting with this group of far right and conspiracy people and the answer to the government, but very quickly it has spread to several of thousand accounts across the full political landscapes, and with different misinformations about Omicron. So here you really see both the governments that say keep calm, this is not so dangerous, and the other parts that are saying either that this is very dangerous, or either it is not dangerous and the government wants to use it to control us. So now let's back to this picture. So this picture is, sorry, I have to monitor the time, that will not be too long. This picture is the French political landscapes between two different periods. And this is 2016 and this is 2022. I show you this because I just want to illustrate how the political landscape has changed and how you have a new community here that has appeared. So in the color codes, the red is the left, the blue is the right. Here you have extreme left to extreme right. And what happened in France is that there is a reconfiguration within 6 years of the political landscapes. So here you have this extreme left and extreme right here, Mélenchon, Le Pen, they are here. So this is always the same anchor, so representation. So Le Pen is here. But what you see is that there was like a new group of people here which is around Florian Philippot that we just saw in the the film, by the way. And these new communities, politically in France, it was like anti-systems, but more specifically, it was about the pandemic. So they used the pandemics to grow their audience. And if you will look inside this different community, what they are talking about, we get this. So this is the Macron community. So you see every terms here is the size is proportional to the number of messages that are talking about these terms. So you see very diverse discourse in Mélenchon, which is extreme right, Macron, which is center, Jadot, which is ecologist, and in Philippot, which is this particular area that has been grown during the pandemics, you see that they are mostly talking about coronavirus. Almost all the posts on the observed periods are talking about coronavirus. And we can even see the emergence of these communities because we can have this representation of the evolution of the political landscapes. So just quickly, here you have several weeks of observation. So the vertical bar observation as the different weeks. One tube here, like that, is a political community. So for example, this is the extreme left. The width of a bar here is the number of people you have in this community. So this is for the week of, this is for the week of the November 8, 2020. You have this amount of people from the left, this amount of people from the far right, this amount of people for the center, etc. And from one week to the other, you see how people are changing communities. So for example, here you have a stream of people, the light blue, that are moving from a moderate right community to a far right community. So this is for several weeks, and the strength of the color here, of the red color here, it's explained here. This is the intensity of the debate on vaccine, how we say consentment. I mean, when you agree to be vaccinated in English. So what you see here is that this is a time when this was announced in the media that we have found a vaccine that most of people were awaiting. So we have found a vaccine and it is efficiency up to 90%. So this was exactly on November 9, 2020. What you see here is that within 2 weeks, there was starting to have polemics about will we be forced to be vaccinated, and that so this is which is the intensity of the color here, and that the first community to go on that narratives or that polemics is this one, the small one here, which is Asselineau and Philippot. This one here is this area here, the same place. And what you see here is that these silly things here, it is now, because of these polemics, meddling with this community, which is a far right. And after some perturbation here, it makes a separate stream that is much stronger than here. So it's here. So the far right is going here, and it's making a stream. And look at the intensity of the color. This means that this community was stronger to push this kind of polemics. And in reaction here, this is the Macron community, so they have to react, so they have to speak. But this is really the community that push this polemics about will we be forced to be vaccinated? And so this is the birth of a new ideological force in the social media. And if you look at I have this, sorry, I want to show you the full evolution of that. Where is it? Yeah, here. So if you zoom out now and you look about all the 5 years, what you see is that this anti-vaccine community, which is here, which was one of the stronger and most important community in the French political landscapes on Twitter at the end of 2022, which was where we have the elections. So this community here has been born here. So what I have shown you is a zoom of this area here. So if you follow back this stream, you get here and here and here. You see that it's going and fade out. So it means before this time, there was no anti-vax community online. But they used this question about the vaccine and they mix it with the idea of liberty, privacy of liberty, free will, to grow their communities. And you see that they are grow progressively but linearly and for several months until they began one of the most influential and bigger community online. So here you really see the emergence of this kind of groups. So now to end, I just want to mention that this pandemic, so we can analyze the different narratives. There is a lot of different narratives circulating in here, but this was also a good digital field opportunity to spread some misinformation, most probably, for example, from Russia. This is an example from Leo Grasset, which was an influencer that was saying that he was receiving a partnership proposal that consists into just killing the Pfizer vaccine, and he was receiving instruction to just make believe it was like a spontaneous positioning against this vaccine. So they say, do not use a word advertising, do not use sponsored video in your post, etc. Present material natively, act like you have the passion and interest in these topics. And when he asked, so they were proposing money against the fact that he would be spreading these things. And when he asked back to this contact who was behind this, they just say, our clients prefer to not disclose who is him. But one of the conclusions was that the death rate of Pfizer was 3 times higher than the vaccinated through AstraZeneca, and also tells that mainstream media ignores this term. So you want to also spread the narrative that the mainstream media are lying to you. And also you want in the same campaign to say why the government are actively purchasing Pfizer. So you want to push the narrative that there is a collision between the government and Pfizer for economical interest against the interest of the population. So here you have a campaign that is mixing several different narratives all at once. First, we are lying about the vaccines because one is more efficient than the other, and let's give the precision that at the same time there was some attempts to couple AstraZeneca with Sputnik V, so the Russian vaccines, to see if it was more efficient, and the results were just to be published. So they have some interest to say that the Pfizer, which was the main vaccine, was a scam. And in the same narrative, you are saying that we are lying about the vaccine. Mainstream media are lying to you, and government are lying to you. Also, what we have observed, because we have made some similar analysis on the climate, because there is also a surge in climate denialism, is that there is a strong overlap between climate disinformation and COVID disinformation. So here you see the number of accounts. So here, like more than 15,000 accounts that are common to an observation of climate debates during the period July 22 to October 22, and the COVID pandemics debates over a period that were months earlier, so between January 20 to May 21. So there is no overlap between these two periods. And also this is two distinct observatory. One is really following COVID vaccine things, and the other is running climate things. But when you look at the geography of the information circulation in these two distinct spaces, then for the climate, you have a really quite distinct things between pro-climate and denialists. And you see that people that are denialists on climate debates, there are most of them also anti-vax in the COVID vaccine debates. And if you split this COVID vaccine debates by topics, then you see that you have French anti-vax, US anti-vax, UK anti-vax, Italian anti-vax, but all of them are more or less aligned with the climate, because actually the core of this narrative are not, are you for or against vaccine, or do you believe or not in climate, but more, are you for or against your institutions? And here you see a kind of, I don't know if it's the right term in English, but opportunism. So some people that are online to push their political agenda, ideology of interest, and that are using the hype of the moment, for example, climate, vaccines, to just push misinformation. And also we show for the particular climate debate that this was strongly linked to other groups that were relaying Russian propaganda. So we have no way to prove that behind there was, for example, the Internet Research Agency from the Russian government. But what we observe is that in terms of informational sphere, you have like some permeability between these different topics. Last, we should highlight that this is not only online that you have this kind of convergence between different conspiracy theory. This is a very recent work from Paul Bouchot, which is working here also at ESA, and he has analyzed the Amazon book recommendations. So he has looked at what Amazon does recommend you, and this is not personalized, so you are not connected. You go to the Amazon book website, and you are asking for something, and what is recommended along with this book. What this study shows, which is really interesting, is that so there is first a strong bubble filter effect. So if you are looking for example, sports things, and you are recommended other sports things. If you are looking for LGBT content, you are recommended other LGBT content, etc., etc. So this is really well isolated, the different topics. But when it comes to topics that are linked to conspiracy theory, then it is very easy to be recommended something about climate when you are looking about some vaccine, etc., etc. So for example, here you have Israeli-Palestinian conflict with the Jewish plot. Here you have all the things about the cancel culture, freedom of expression, and Muslim Brotherhood. Here you have the decline of France and political elites. Here you have global warming. Here you have the Great Reset. So this means that algorithmically, on a website like Amazon that is providing people with most of their recommendation, links are made between narratives that are detailed in books. So this is really a problem, because here you have the contagions between several types of narratives. You read a book of climates and you like it, and you go back to Amazon and say, okay, there is something nice about the pandemics, and now you want also to know why the government is lying to you about the Israel-Palestinian war, etc., etc. So this is also just to keep in mind that there's many other places where you could have algorithmic bias that make connection between topics that should not be connected. Okay, so now just to conclude with some global understanding about how all this circulation is possible, whatever the narratives, is that I want to emphasize that you have some systemic effects on the digital environment. And what you have to understand is that most of the content that is viewed online is pushed by recommendation algorithm. When you go to Amazon, you see mostly books recommended by the Amazon recommendation agents. When you go online on social networks, then most of the content you see on your timeline, actually all the content that you see on your timeline, is pushed by some recommendation algorithm. And the question is how all this layer of recommendation is constraining the circulation of narratives and also the public opinion formations. And just to give you one short insight, because I don't want to be too long, you have to know that on the timelines on different platforms, it could be Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, etc. So most of the content all the contents that are in the timeline are filtered, but they are not showing all the content because you are in your time reading time of a platform. You only have the time to read, for example, an average of 20% of what your neighbors in the people that you are following actually produce. So we show you only, the platforms only show you 20% of the content, and the question is how these 20% are chosen. So just an experiment of thought. Imagine that you are in your timeline and you see these two different contents. So one is saying to you that the COVID vaccine is safe and that children for years, from 5 years and up can be vaccinated safely. And now you have at the same moment, approximately, you have another tweet that say what we are telling you is misleading. There is some danger for your children, and you can click here to learn why. So on average, people and the platforms are conceived so that you have to click on something to know more, because they want to know what you are interested in. So they force you to click to something. So here, if you want to click to know more, the thing is that on average, people will click more on the right content than the left content, because there is what we call a negativity bias, which is a psychology bias that make you to interact preferentially with anxiety provoking or negative content. This is some bias that we have online, offline, everywhere. The problem is that the platforms, because most of these platforms are trying to push you engaging content. So in the 20% that they show you from what your social environment produce, they try to show you content that have some engagement. So this means this negative bias says that the contents that will be the most engaged are the ones that are some toxic or negative aspects. Others they say you that there is danger, others they insult you, others they say. So what we can demonstrate, and we have demonstrated this on Twitter, is that we can measure this bias on Twitter. And for example, on Twitter, what we show is that what Twitter is showing you in your timeline has an enrichment on average of plus 50% of toxic message compared to what you want to follow. So you follow some account, but what is shown to you from what this account are producing is 50% more toxic than what this account actually produce. So this means that all the disinformation, and in particular the disinformation about vaccine, because there was saying that vaccine are threatening you, you will lose you will become sterile, you will have some blood clots, etc. This was naturally pushed by these kind of platforms. Also, what we show here is that when you analyze this from a theoretical point of view, you can demonstrate that the same algorithmic design and recommendation design, they concentrate the social power in the hand of the most toxic user. So it means that in the most connected user, you have an overrepresentation of people that spread toxic content. And actually, for example, if you look in Facebook, it has been analyzed that during the pandemics, so first, 80% of the disinformation, so this was an internal Facebook study that was revealed by the leak of Franz Haugens that have worked inside Facebook and just was a whistleblower. So what they exposed is that Facebook has measured that 80% of the COVID disinformation was oriented in the Facebook feeds of only 4% of the user. This means that you have all the disinformation that have been directed to a very small fraction of the population that were overflowed by this kind of misinformation and would be radicalized. 4% is a lot of people, because Facebook has like 50 to 70 penetration in every country. So it means that you have 2 or 3% of the population that becomes radicalized with that. But worst, they also showed that most of the Facebook disinformation in English was produced by 12 accounts. This means that you have 12 accounts that are able to reach 2-3% of the population in several countries, just because you have this effect of algorithmic recommendation and amplification of and actually the failure of the Facebook machinery. So I will stop here just to also explain you that within the Node project, we have these problems that they suddenly decided to not give us access anymore to the Twitter, which is a really problem. So first, we have analyzed Twitter to show that we should be entitled to go and analyze what's happening in the platforms. So at the period, Twitter was a problem, but the bigger problem is that we were not be able to look at what's happening in Facebook, in Twitter, in Instagram, in TikTok, and the same phenomena are occurring there. But now even Twitter is closed. So we just make the case that it was important to be able to look at what's happening in these platforms. But now it is in the end of the regulators that are now deploying the DMA, and there will be like a juridical and lawyering fight for that. So I want just to summarize very quickly. So first, there is a circulation of this information about COVID vaccines. And this is worldwide, and different versions of the same misinformation are circulating from one country to the other. So we saw this, for example, for the fact-checking. So this is a globalized environment. Second, it's not really about COVID vaccines, but it is more globally about fueling the systems with anti-system narratives, that the same group of people are fueling this about climate, about vaccines, about immigration, etc. And last, that they are so much successful because first of the machinery of the design of the platforms itself that completely distorts the circulation of information. And second, because they are very likely, and some intelligence agencies have exposed this already on some topics. So there is very likely lots of foreign interference and ingerence inside on these topics online, because it is really easy and cheap to come on the digital field of countries and try to spread some narratives that will just spread the conflict between the population. So all this work was work with colleagues, so including Ixana and Ioannis, which is here working for Node, and also Mazia and Paul Bouchot, which are working for other projects. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, David, and your whole team for this really interesting presentation. I know we've gone a little bit over time. We might have been a bit enthusiastic, but it was so interesting, David. So I think it was really important, and everyone has been really fascinated by all this work. So I definitely think the time was worth it to look into this. And as you know, I'm a big fan of the work that you do. And I think in particular, what you highlight about the risks of polarization is so important. And for those of you who know about us and the work that we're doing on polarization, we're going to do a big event where nodes will be discussed and presented. And we're going to have several workshops also on the beginning of February on depolarized Europe ahead of the European elections. And looking at many of these issues, because I do think there's something systemic and very challenging happening there. And we need to think about what is the toolbox to combat this. And as I think the work that you showed, David, really shows that there's no one silver bullet solution. We have to work from a variety of different aspects, from access to data, from algorithmic bias, and also obviously understanding how narratives work. And I think the work you presented at the end in particular, where you were really showing about underlining that seeing how these, let's put it, the under narratives and the meta narratives correlate between the climate debate, for instance, the COVID debate, really segues very well into our next presentation, where Professor Andrzej Nowak, I'm sorry, I said Professor Marcin Japorkowski before. Marcin is also here, has been very active in the work, but Andrzej will be giving the presentation on from the narratives perspective. So now we've looked from the patterns, what is happening from the comm side. Now we're moving on to actually understanding why are we seeing these patterns happening? What is happening from a narrative perspective? Andrzej, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So I'll talk, David has shown a perspective mainly from the point of view of network science. I'll be talking more about the narratives. As you can see, this is a result of the whole research team of Mikołaj Biesaga, Anna Boros, Marcin Napiórkowski, Patrycja Piechnicka, and Szymon Talaga, working at Reimagine Europe. The next slide, please. So the interesting thing is that, well, so first of all, there is an interesting phenomenon about COVID narratives, because right now in many countries of Europe, we have currently COVID epidemics. In Poland, it's, quite pronounced. Yet, I mean, COVID is not really a topic of the mainstream debates, or it's not really one of the dominating topics. And the interesting, however, I think that understanding the narratives on COVID has very important consequences for understanding narratives on potential future epidemics, but also more general about narratives about disasters and how we can react to them, what measures can be taken, who is responsible, and so on. So I think that this is very informative. So for a couple of years, really, the world has changed as a result of COVID-19, and this change has many dimensions. And as David has shown, and as a part of this broader shift, a very small initial anti-vaccination movement became a focal point of the mainstream debate and has been able to influence the general social dynamics. But really, if we analyze what really happened, is that we can see that really the whole debate that this is not and has never really was about vaccines. This was about some vaccines was just like a vehicle to promote views on more general social issues. So really public debate. So these issues are, for example, small guy versus big industry, nature versus technology, individual freedom versus government, or individual freedom versus solidarity. And I'll try to I'll discuss some narratives, and I hope these points will be more clear. And I think that one of the arguments supporting this view is that in the course of COVID, the discussion was had three main waves. One was really about, or three main topics, and this was about first of all lockdowns, masks, and finally vaccines. And what we see is that the same matrix, each of them is very different topic actually, but we can see the same narrative matrix that has been repeated for all of these three topics, and really. That all the three topics were just served as a proper vehicle to express deeper values and rifts in the society. And what we can also see, and I think that I think David has also been showing this, that the active anti-vaccination movement is just another incarnation of some anti-movement. And we can see a very similar structure of the debate on the climate change, migration, gender issues, and many other topics. Next slide, please. So some main questions that arise are, first of all, is that how the collective need for answers in situations of distress led to another pandemics, the pandemics of disinformation. Because really we have seen, and also David has shown it, there have been an explosion of suddenly of disinformation. The question is, what part of this was simply of this movement and social dynamics was organic, just people kind of expressing their true feelings and concerns, and how much this was artificial. It was controlled. It was especially this was an internal or external influence, basically to destabilize Europe in times of crisis. And also how political polarization catalyzed the hostility and make evidence-based communication much more difficult, and of course, how we can address it. So we need evidence-based policy to deal with such crises like pandemics, and we need strong public support and understanding for the adapted policies. And the interesting thing is that we use science to understand the spread of the virus and create vaccines. But but also social sciences tell us a lot about how information spreads and what we can do to fight the pandemic of distrust and disinformation. Next. So why we adopt the narrative approach and why the narratives are important? Well, first of all, they're important for understanding because we accept or reject information based on narratives, but also we act or refuse to act based on narratives. So they're crucial for action. And the third, their main function is just building communities and identities. So we include or exclude others based on narrative. And really to be able to enable constructive dialogue on, in the times of crisis and fight polarization, we need to go beyond the dividing narratives and concentrate on common values. And as we will demonstrate, really many opposing narratives have some underlying common values, and actually concentrating on these values can allow us to build new narratives that allow for constructive debates about solutions rather than fighting in a very polarized world. So actually, in Reimagine Europa, we have developed a reframe methodology to depolarize the debate. As Erika said, this will be, in detail discussed during the meeting in Lisbon. Here I'm just kind of showing a glimpse. We think we have some ideas how to, or we think we know how to address this information. Polarization. But today we'll just focus on identifying the dominant narratives, identifying polarizing language, and identifying shared values and narrative bridges that can help us go beyond the polarized narratives. So we have analyzed two types of stories, and one is just a corpus to identify and understand the narratives and this information. We first started from long text, articles, blog posts, and so on, in 4 languages, which is Spanish, French, the blogs from Ireland, and also Polish blogs. So we concentrated on exclusively European debate. But this was based on sites that previously was labeled as disinformation, scientific communication, and mainstream media. And then we used our initial insights to analyze a second corpus. The first one is not representative. Another one gives views of different sites, which is basically here we concentrated on Facebook posts from 5 countries. And the mainstream and the sources were mainstream media, political parties, institutions, NGOs, disinformation outlets, and scientific communication. So we had several well-defined sources and then we kind of monitored their public communication with respect to COVID-19. Please. So our approach is different than the dominant approach in analyzing the flow of information in the social media, because in the traditional dominant view in the existing literature, narratives are synonymous with topics and are identified based on keywords. So basically, the occurrence of a given keyword decides, well, which narrative it would be. And narratives are mainly is understanding as a types of similar, basically, of text on similar topic. So you can see here a traditional, temporal dynamics of different narratives based on the frequency of the occurrence of keywords associated with them. We have, however, seen in our analysis that the keyword approach is not very accurate to identify narratives, and so we need to. Then you also have adopt slightly different understanding of narratives. So what we are looking for is, first of all, are the dominant motives, phrases, images, and so on. Second, we are looking for basic structure of the story. And then implied narrative community. And based on the three criteria, we are looking to describe the basic narratives. So we started from a map of basic motives, and later have been in that simply a lot of posts, and then that we clustered them, and then we would merge them, and just the 6 basic narratives emerged based on the 3 criteria we gave you before. Okay. We have noticed that really there is some organization. So there are 2 main axes, which one can be described as collectivist, which needs to collectivism. It needs, we need to act together, and solidarity, we need to protect the weakest. And that's on the other extreme, there is individualism. Individuals should make free choices, should take care of themselves. Freedom is the freedom of choice is very high value, but individuals then must face the consequences of their decisions. And the second axis is the axis of view of the role of government. So on the top you have strong government, big government, and the notions of solutions is that it should come from top-down regulation. In the bottom you have really the vision of weak government, small government, and the idea that a solution must be made by bottom-up activity. Okay. If we look for the main narratives, and shortly I'll describe them, we can see 6 basic narratives. 4 of those are organized by the axis I have just described. So, for example, there is those high on top-down regulation. The left one is yearning for stabilization, and the right one is top-down stabilization. So it's simply, in both of those views, the government is responsible and should provide the response and safety, security, and response to the crisis. On the left one, this is saying, well, the vision of the government, it is that this is weak, ineffective, and this is just critiques of the government. This is an anti-government movement, but here the government is not evil, it is just very ineffective, and just nothing works, and the government is just helpless. On the right-hand side, the government is seen as providing effective solutions, addressing the issues in need, providing security, and so on. On the bottom left, there is bottom-up solidarity. So it says, so this is, we have to act together. We can do it, but we need to cooperate. You need to do your thing, and you need to help others. On the right one is the view that is basically we need to resist the COVID dystopia. This is where, by the way, this is the narrative that concentrates by far the most disinformation, like all the kind of, a lot of false disinformation, and this is basically the view that all kinds of anti-COVID measures are are limiting freedom. They're wrong. They're causing more harm than good. There are conspiracy theories and so on. Then we see two more descriptive narratives. One is just raw explanation of what happens about the epidemic, what is the virus, how many people get sick, and so on. Every day, but another one is just kind of a reflection on general irreversible changes that this pandemic has done. So, for example, people started, for example, I mean, our life has changed. Now we can work remote. Okay, let's go. So now, if you look for this, for each narrative, like this, yearning for stabilization, it treats COVID-19 as a serious threat. However, it focuses on criticism of the government, institutions, and elites and big companies for their ineffectiveness, sluggishness, or greed. And the values behind it is security, stabilization, and distrust in current government. And this narrative criticizes current governments, greed, often big pharma. You can see here that this is often, I mean, I think you have the typical types of images associated with this narrative. I think that is very, I think that, the one, the left on the left hand side is characteristic because it talks about kind of this satire, I mean, showing, I mean, this, you can see it just shows politicians as weak and ineffective, and so on. The top-down stabilization is a very positive narrative. It treats COVID-19 as a serious threat. That's the first one. Institutions are perceived as a shield that is able to protect the society against both the virus itself and the chaos that may result from the pandemics. The top values are order, security, stabilization, trust in government. What is critiquing is just inducing fear. And if you look at the typical mood board or icons visual images used with this narrative, very often, I mean, the one on the left-hand side show a very often used metaphor of a shield. So it is umbrella or just a shield that can protect us from the virus. So the government is the umbrella or shield protection, effective protection against the virus. The narrative on bottom-up solidarity treats COVID-19 as a serious threat and a major challenge to our humanity and empathy. But different forms of bottom-up solidarity and responsible altruistic behavior are presented as effective means of mitigating the crisis, while egoism and carelessness are the major threat to society. So the values are solidarity, empathy, cooperation, responsibility. If we look at the iconography of this, you can, I think the middle column is the most interesting. By the way, these are the same images we see in climate narratives. It is just work being together. We're together we stand, and this images of kind of hands being together is just I think highlight the main message, like we stand together and we need to find the solutions. Now, the fourth one is really stands in opposition to all the previous three narratives. It contains the most disinformation. This narrative does not treat COVID-19 as a serious threat. Pandemic is presented as fake or grossly exaggerated. It serves as a justification for limiting freedom and imposing dictatorships of the experts and big companies. In more radical versions, some preventing measures such as vaccines may be extremely, or even masks may be extremely harmful. So the basic values are individual freedom and entrepreneurship. It is also very negative, very critical. it critiques government, control and greed. Okay. And here you can see that, for example, images images on the left-hand side, kind of demonstrations and protests are one of this of the symbols of, well, we need to stand up, and we cannot against this all unjustified means of imposing control of us, and we need to stop these measures. Okay. Then we have the raw explanation. So this narrative doesn't account to human. It just describes how viruses work, how many people are getting very sickly, how the vaccine works, and so on. But what is important is that if we read posts from these narratives, I mean, they contain both evidence information, but also non-proven theories and fake news. And this is difficult. It needs some knowledge of science to know which are fake, what is true, what is false, because distinguishing them on the level of patterns, narrative patterns, is often impossible. And so here, I think that what is very characteristic for graphics is that this is just vector graphics and charts and so on. And finally, the world has changed. There has been the pandemic, a radical disruption that dramatically changed our worlds. Some of these changes are maybe even positive, like distance learning, remote jobs, or reducing unnecessary travel. And this is, however, contrary to the narrative 5, these changes are being perceived as permanent. And you can see here very often the narratives are kind of, are just basically of a globe plus virus, like changing global our life. You also have often vector graphics, but also you can see here futuristic interfaces. That, by the way, we see this also in climate narratives. Okay. So there is, as I said, there is the most the narrative that conveys the most information is the one that we need to resist the COVID dystopia. And this is a generic anti-movement narratives, very similar to the one we have identified in the climate change debate. And this is the narratives most prone to disinformation and manipulation. We can see now that the main subjects of the debate have been changing. On here you see what people search for on the internet from from Google Trends, and that you see that in the beginning there was people were looking or searching for information about the virus, and then this was almost concurrently maps and COVID. But then this was the main topic was absolutely the dominant for the second part of the pandemic. The dominant pattern was vaccine. Okay, please. And this we have seen the same in the same countries. This is the analysis of our own data set of Facebook posts, and what you can see here, that very similar dynamics that initially this was lockdowns, and started from a small spike of general information. Then there was like concurrence of mass and lockdowns, and finally the vaccines absolutely dominated the discussion space. And this is on the top left. You can see the global data. The other 5 panels shows that basically in each of the analyzed country, we see very, very similar dynamics. The topic has changed, but really the matrix of narratives remained constant. So now you can see some examples of actual posts that, the first one is on lockdowns, right? Like, there is a communication chaos. Nobody knows what's allowed and what is forbidden. And of course, this is clearly attributed to the chaos, right? The government is ineffective. Or the opposite of this, on the right hand, stay calm, stay at home. Violations of lockdown and quarantine rules will be severely punished. But then, I mean, if you go to this, to the lower side of smaller government, this becomes, stay home, stay safe, right? I mean, we need to do it rather than be forced to do this. And then lower right is lockdown is unconstitutional and violates basic human rights in addition to bankrupting thousands of small businesses. Please, next slide. Okay, the other two, maybe I'll not even, because for the sake of time, I'll not really, you can just briefly read it, but I'll not elaborate on this. And this is, and then we can see that that within, I mean, of course, Europe was also mentioning in different posts, and this is just kind of, a summary of basically of view of in all the 4 quadrants of on the role of Europe. Like, okay, go up, please. So why isn't Europe doing more? Okay, or versus Europe is effectively protecting us, versus we are Europe, versus Brussels bureaucracy is using COVID-19 to interfere with every aspects of our life. These are not the actual, this is our summaries of narratives, not the actual posts. Okay. So how can we communicate? Well, no one size fits all solutions. So we need highly tailored solutions to reach different groups based on different values. And in order to do so, we need to identify and understand the values behind different narratives and look for potential narrative bridges that connect them. So you can see now what we have done. We have identified the main values behind, or we can graph them behind each narrative. And you can, for example, see that the both top narratives are connected, for example, by security, right? But for example, the top left and lower right are connected by the distrust in government. So let's now try to connect the narratives by the values they share. So here is, and we call this is what we call narrative bridges. There are values that are common to both narratives, and although the narratives are very similar, the bridges are basically some values are common to the narratives, and they form a bridge that actually can be used for a shift between narrative communities. So basically, and also changing the narratives. So you can see that distrust in current government and critique of greed is common to is linking the upper left and lower right narrative. However, this bridge is really risky to use, because really what happens often, what you can see happening in this bridge is that this general kind of distrust in government may be a way, and I think David was showing this, that the group just kind of being dissatisfied with the government being ineffective broadens their scope of negativity to basically to include lots of disinformation and belief. Okay, so when we go there's another one. There's another, we can see a positive bridge between another narrative bridge between the 2 bottom ones, and actually this is basically where there is a question of how we can that basically both of them believe in agency and entrepreneurship. Okay, so actually I think in the exercise we will look into this in more detail. Thank you.